Hey there. So this map probably looks familiar to most of you. I figured we'd have a little look at Vienna again today. And I'd love to tell you a little bit about my current obsession. I recently got myself a cinema subscription. Non Stop Kino. And I've been going to the cinema so much, so I'd love to share a little bit about the cinemas that participate in the subscription service and the movies I've been watching. If you're thinking cinema subscription, never heard of that, it was new for me as well. They announced it about a year ago, and it started this year. So you pay a fixed rate per month, which is I think 22 for students and 26 normally. And then you can go to the cinema as often as you want. In my case, I made use of a special offer they had in summer. I got it for an entire year, and it comes down to about 20 euros a month. Each film would cost around 10 euros, so if I go to the cinema twice a month, then I'll be fine. They have these cute little postcards. Here says popcorn, docus or documentaries, lachen, laughter, and schmusen, which is a bit of an Austrian expression, which means to kiss, as you can see here. And that's basically the explanation of what you have to do. You can get your subscription online, and then you can enjoy going to the cinema. It's a system that I think was adopted from, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was a Belgian city that's using that. And it seems to have worked quite well there. So I'd love to tell you a bit about the cinemas that participate, because there's a lot of history to it that I didn't know either. When I was younger, I often heard about the death of cinemas. So 80s, 90s, a lot of cinemas in the inner cities had to close down, particularly older ones. And instead they would create these huge cineplex or multiplex buildings on the outskirts of cities. In Vienna, the situation is a bit different, but basically where I grew up in Upper Austria, I think we had 2 inner city cinemas when I was little, and both of them are gone by now, and you just have these big cineplexes outside. In Vienna, obviously a lot of cinemas did have to shut down, but some of them have survived an incredibly long time, in fact. So for example, let's just move the candle for a second. Here in Burggasse, I don't know the exact numbers here, but roughly in this area, there's the Admiral Kino. And that one opened in 1912. It was a time when a lot of cinemas opened, more than 100 in the period from 1911 to 1914. So it was very, very popular at the start of the century. The Admiral Kino is in one of these old buildings, just as it was back then. At the time, of course, this was still a suburb, Vienna really only was the actual inner city. But one advantage that the Admiralkino had was that the Stadtbahn had been built. So today that's the U6 line right here, meaning you could easily get there. There's a station not far away from Burggasse. By 1931 they switched to audio films, and then unfortunately after the Anschluss the owners were expropriated. That's something that happened to a lot of the cinemas in Vienna. In the case of the Admiralkino, the rightful owners got it back in the 1950s, Margarete and Ludwig Ebner. They chose not to come back to Vienna though, and instead sold their property. There's a Stein der Erinnerung in front of the building today, a stone of remembrance. The Kinosterben, so the closing of the cinemas in the 70s and 80s, Admiralkino survived because they made sure to specifically cater to the student scene. So they found a little niche that allowed them to continue existing. But now, of course, it's been renovated, and while the building is still the original one, they do use more modern technology than back in the 30s. And like a lot of the cinemas that I'm going to talk about, they have some specials that kind of make them stand out. And I really love that part about the Admiralkino. Once a month they offer Kino mit Hund, meaning you can take a dog with you. They usually show some dog-specific movies like Susi and Strolch. I don't actually know what the English title is. The cartoon about Susie and the tramp. Is that it? The Lady and the Tramp. So you can watch that with your dog. Another one that's included in the subscription is the Burgkino, which is, so let me think, roughly here along Opernring and Burgring. So it's very, very central. This one too opened in 1912 and has a very similar story to the Admiral one. The special thing about the Burgkino was that during the 50s, 60s and 70s, it was the only cinema in all of Germany and Austria that showed movies in their original versions, so in English. In German language countries, it's very common to get dubbed versions, both in the cinema and on TV. So you hear the actors speak in German. In other areas of the world, that's not common. For example, in Scandinavia, I think you just have subtitles. And in the former Soviet Union, you would just hear someone talk over it. So kind of like we have with documentaries here. You hear the original sound underneath and then someone talks over it in your language. So with the German language market, you wouldn't hear the original English. You would only hear someone talk in German. I've been to the Burgkino quite often. For a while, it really was one of the main cinemas I went to see movies in the original version. I think once you get used to not watching the dub version, it's kind of difficult to go back. They also regularly show The Third Man, which is a movie set in post-war Vienna, a film noir that I admit I've never seen. But you can actually take a Third Man tour through the underground of Vienna. There's a museum for it. And you can go to the cinema every week to watch it. a little further south, let's see, near Margaretenplatz, somewhere here in this area, there's the Film Casino. Again, opened around the same time, 1911. This one actually closed in the 70s, and a Yugoslavian cultural organization moved in. In the late 80s, however, the VHS Margareten decided to reopen it as a cinema. VHS is like an adult education center. You find them anywhere across the city. They're very popular for example, language courses, but you can also take courses in arts and crafts or anything to do with business information you might need. So they really have a wide variety of courses you can take. I don't actually know why I decided to open a cinema, but it was a good choice because the Film Casino has been really successful. It's doing quite well, and they have plenty of information on their homepage on the different years, what kind of movies they showed, what kind of specials they introduced. They actually said that 2017 was their most successful year. And then even with the lockdowns of the last years, they were doing all right. They had a lot of sold out screenings, which is nice to hear. And since 2018, they have a second venue called Filmhaus, which is, let's see if I can find it, somewhere here at Spittelberg. I always get a bit lost here in these small places. I might actually go there tonight once we're done filming. They're showing The Place Beyond the Pines with Ryan Gosling. I recently watched Barbie and I just really enjoyed his performance. So I might go and check that out tonight. Another one, that one's been my favorite recently, is the Programmkinos. So that one's across from Stadtpark. I guess around here. And just like with the Film Casino, you wouldn't guess that it's from the early 20th century. Both of these have a mid-century look today. The Film Casino is still in the original building, but it was completely rebuilt. The Gartenbaukino, the original Palais, was actually torn down and they built something completely new in 1960. I really love this though. It's just a gorgeous mid-century building, really nicely renovated recently. And this is really one of the main cinemas for the cinema subculture here. A lot of openings happen here. The big film festivals always take place at Gartenbaukino. Back when it reopened in 1961, it was with Spartacus and Kirk Douglas was present. They only have one single auditorium, but it's ginormous. It's for 900 people with a huge wall and a huge screen. It's really lovely. Not far from it is the Stadtkino. So close to the opera. Opera would be here. There's Karlsplatz. And there's the Künstlerhaus. I think it's right here. The Stadtkino moved here in the 80s. It was originally located at Schwarzenbergplatz, so not too far away. And it's in the wing of a larger building that's from 1868. So here the area around the ring, this is where the fortifications were that were torn down in the middle of the 19th century, and all of these buildings were added. It's a really, really beautiful auditorium with, I think it's the only one that has that. There are images on the sides of the walls with allegories to the different arts. So it looks more like a theatre, really. Then nearby we have two smaller ones. Let's see. There's the Cinecentre here, and Top Kino should be. Let me see. I think it should be here. So these two are quite small, but very cute. I have to admit, I think of them more as bars or restaurants, particularly Cinecentre. But again, the cinemas date back to, I think in the case of Cinecentre, 1906 even. But yeah, like I said, it's more known for the bar and the DJ lineups, and you can kind of hang out there until 5 in the morning. Right, and then we have two more that are actually connected. There's the Votive Kino. Let me think. Schatzspanierstraße. I think it should be somewhere here. And they run a second smaller one across from the Börse. About here, I think, called De France. The De France, again, actually from 1913. However, the original auditorium, which was one of the only ones built level to the ground, no underground, was demolished in the 80s when the Palais was restructured into a hotel. They then added two very small auditoriums underground. So it looks very 80s, and they kind of praise how it feels very familiar. It has an intimate atmosphere. It's very cute, but tiny. And then the Votive here is also from 1912. Some of these, by the way, like the Votive, have a really interesting structure. You can sit a little further up on a balcony. It's like at a theatre. And there's another one, the Metro Kino, that's being added in September, which is here in Annergasse, which actually is located in a former theatre, so that's probably the most extravagant auditorium out of all of these. Alright, so these are all quite central, and they're all basically Programmkinos. It means they don't necessarily show the mainstream movies, but they sometimes have like a special program that they're showing. Right now, for example, they do show Barbie and Oppenheimer and other movies that are coming out right now. But they also have, like for example here, Votive Kino. something called Was wir lieben. So everyone in the team picks their favorite movie, and that's what they're showing throughout summer. So for example, there was The Man Who Wasn't There, Donnie Darko, Jojo Rabbit, Dog Day Afternoon. They also had a tribute to Greta Gerwig, where they showed Lady Bird and Little Women. And they often have Film und Gespräch. So a director or some of the actors might be present. Recently at Film Casino, there were some podcasters that were doing the introduction, the little Q&A afterwards. So it's not just seeing a movie that's currently running, but you get a lot of specials around it. So I actually went to see Little Women, which I missed when it was in the cinemas originally. I really liked it. I thought it was such a warm and loving film, and I really enjoyed the performances, particularly Meryl Streep. Then we also caught Barbie at the Votive Kino, and I went to see Astolfo. It says here, a brilliant comedy. It's an Italian movie about this retired professor who's kicked out of his flat in Rome. And he kind of remembers that he actually has this palais at a little place outside of Rome. It's a bit odd, and I kind of quickly noticed that I wasn't the target audience for this movie. There were mostly elderly people in the audience. But when the lights came on at the end, the two ladies next to me kind of looked at each other with sparks in their eyes, and they said, "Oh, wasn't that wonderful? Just enchanting, lovely." So they really, really enjoyed it. It's a cute movie. I didn't find it that funny, but it's kind of very, very tender. These two fall in love. That's the main point of the movie. And then here there's a little overview of what they're showing next. There's Vienna Calling on the music scene here. Past Lives, a Korean film that looks really, really beautiful. We're definitely going to try and catch that one. There's The Inspection from the US, about a young man who's gay and decides to join the Marines in order to regain the respect of his mom. There's Les Jeunes Amours with Fanny Ardant, who I love. I haven't been able to find a date yet when I can see it. After Astolfo, I felt like maybe one of these movies is enough. Il primo giorno della mia vita, another Italian film, and Les Amandiers, a French one. So as you can see, it's a lot of European movies and kind of more independent films. Here at Film Casino, the first movie I watched with my subscription was La Boum, a really famous French movie from the early 80s with Sophie Marceau. You probably know her from the Bond movie that she was in. And I remember when I was a kid, this was on TV so often, and it always said, "Oh, it's this famous French film." Basically, it's about this 13-year-old girl that moves to Paris with her parents, and she joins a new class. You know, everyone's hitting puberty, everyone's constantly going to parties. La boum means the party. But falling in love, and her parents kind of go through a rough patch in a marriage. It was really strange. Not what I expected. It's kind of more like, I don't know, like a soap. I'm glad we watched it, but it was a bit unexpected. So that's La Boom, a summer special. They also show in Ronja Räubertochter. I loved that one as a kid. Ronja grows up in a castle in the woods and befriends the son of another robber who is at war with her family. Alma and Oskar is also currently running, about Alma Mahler and Oskar Kokoschka. So set in 1900 Vienna. And the movie I'm really excited about is Passage. There was a special opening on Monday, I think, for anyone with a Non Stop subscription. But unfortunately I couldn't make it. There's Les Chenons. And these are from Programmkinos. Probably my favorite special actually was at Programmkinos. It's called Nachtblende. So late screenings at the weekend. They start at 10:30. And they pick a special theme for these 5 movies that they're showing per season. This is summer, autumn, and the theme is nocturnal lights. So the artificial lights of the metropolis. They're showing movies set in Los Angeles, New York City, Hong Kong, Tokyo, and finally Rome. I got the first 2, which were Strange Days by Catherine Bigelow from 1995. I really enjoyed this one. I think I actually saw it probably back around 2000. It's set in the last days of 1999. And there's unrest and chaos in the streets of the city. There's a bit of an apocalyptic feeling, but I think most of this was inspired by the political unrest of the early 90s. There's also some new technology that allows you to record your sensory experience and then other people can relive it. It's quite disturbing at times. The main reason I wanted to see it was Angela Bassett, who plays this really iconic role. She's fantastic in this movie. And from this text, I didn't realize the screenplay is actually by James Cameron. And afterwards, I thought that makes a lot of sense. Both the sort of this apocalyptic feeling in the city reminded me a lot of Dark Angel, that series he did in the 90s. And I think Angela Bassett's character is very much like, for example, Ellen Ripley or Sarah Connor. So these really tough female figures that he writes that still show a lot of vulnerability. something he does really well, and this was really great. And then the second film they showed was Cruising last weekend by William Friedkin, who passed away this year. It says here William Friedkin often made films that were labeled scandalous, like The Exorcist, and Cruising also falls under that category. Al Pacino plays a young cop who goes undercover in the gay leather scene of New York. He tries to find an alleged serial killer. And there was a lot of controversy around the movie back then. It wasn't very successful. I think neither was Strange Days, in fact. There were a lot of protests, particularly by members of the subculture who were worried that it was portrayed in a very bad light. I think generally people have warmed to the movie a bit, but there's also some sort of ambivalent reviews. I thought it was a really good movie, but it definitely feels like it doesn't fully commit to the questions that it poses. We don't really know if there actually was a serial killer. The ending is really strange. I've seen two different interpretations of it. One that I find quite disturbing, and one that I think makes a bit more sense. But it's difficult to read that from the movie because so much of it had to be cut. It would have been released with an X rating, so Friedkin ended up deleting 40 minutes of film, so he got an R rating at least. Unfortunately, when he wanted to add these 40 minutes back into the film for DVD release, he found out that they had been destroyed. They don't exist anymore, so we don't really know what the original cut would have been like. But yeah, I think there's it's a movie that's almost kind of being haunted by its own topic that it can't fully explore. It was fascinating. They also showed a short film afterwards, Scorpio Rising. But I have to admit, it was so late at that point, I actually nodded off for a bit. Right, and then the next ones will be Tokyo Drifter, The Heroic Trio, and Inferno. And I haven't seen any of these. I don't know if I'll be able to make any of these. Inferno might be a little too gross for me. I recently watched the remake of Suspiria. I think the original is by Dario Argento, and that one was kind of borderline for me. I do like horror movies, but more like the ghost story kind and less the slasher movies. I don't know if that is a slasher movie, but it looks a bit gross. So that's been something that's brought me a lot of joy recently. And I think now with the days getting darker again and the weather getting colder, it's just the right time to go to the cinema. Let me know what your favorite movies recently have been, or if there's anything you're really excited about. I'm open to watching pretty much anything at the moment. I need to make use of my subscription after all. And if you've drifted off to sleep by now, then That's alright with me as well. Thank you for watching. I'll see you again next week. Good night.